Coming up on this episode of the podcast, it's the end of MultiVersus. Where did it all go wrong? First, we recap our takeaways from the game from before it was shut down for the first time almost 2 years ago. Was it once a resounding success, or were the problems that led to its collapse present from the very beginning? Find out now on comic books, video games, television, and movies. These barely Irish assholes must band together to make sense of it all. It's not news. It's utterly nonsense. This is the Utterly Nonsense Podcast. Guess what? We're back. Again. After about as long a time as what we're going to be talking about had a huge lull in communication. Yeah, so sorry about that if you're wondering. But nothing major really happened. So we just decided, you know what? Something happened. Interesting enough that we finally decided to come out of our caves and record something for once. So here we are.
You know, it's like we did our last podcast about a year ago, talking about a video game that, you know, we didn't think was going to last. And now we are talking about another video game that obviously isn't going to last.
Yeah. And it's a shame because this one I actually cared about.
This one I actually thought had potential when it started out. It's like when we did do the whole Pal World talk, I sort of figured, oh, after this initial hype, it's not going to go anywhere. And, you know, it's not offline yet, but at the same time, I don't think anyone's still playing it. I mean, to be fair, I didn't look at the numbers, like, since we probably did that review about a year ago, but...
I've been checking every now and then on Steam database, and I still notice it has a decent amount of players. If I'm looking right now, at the time we're recording, there is concurrently 50,000 players on Steam.
Okay, good for them.
90,000 24-hour peak. All-time peak, 13 months ago, so, like, right before we recorded, was over 2 million.
Okay, so at its height, it was definitely more impressive than our topic for today.
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, I mean, just to give this some preamble, we recorded an episode, it was our 91st episode, going back a couple years.
2022.
2022, yeah. So, basically, we recorded this review for MultiVersus. We were in the alpha version, actually, if people really remember that far back.
We did the alpha because when it was announced, it had like a sign up for that. So I got a couple keys that I shared with everybody. And then we were in the closed pre-beta, which was like a week. And then it opened up to the public as the full beta. It was basically the full release until they said it wasn't later.
Yeah, so...
But it was the full release.
And we'll explain the whole timeline here, but when we were actually playing the beta, it felt like a full game. Like, I mean, there were definitely some things that at the time I was thinking, oh, this could be improved on. Oh, they're probably going to tweak this. And, you know, I noticed that it said beta version when you would log into the game. But at the same time, it's like, I don't think anyone ever thought they were going to close it and do this full release, you know, basically a year after that.
You know, to draw a comparison to another long-standing live service game, there's a game called Warframe, which is an MMO. And that, I believe, has technically been in a permanent beta. And the reason for that, according to the developers anyway, leaving it in beta status makes it easier for them to put out updates across all the platforms, because they're like not only on PC, but like every console now, even iPhone somehow. My point being, this game could have been similarly on a permanent beta if they were planning to do frequent live updates. So right. I think the matter over whether it was a full release or not is kind of moot. Because it seemed like it was anyway.
At the time, and I still sort of hold this, because, again, it's... we'll get into the reasons why I felt, and I know I keep saying that, but it always felt like marketing strategy to me, especially for something that WB clearly didn't put a lot of faith into to begin with, that they probably planned on closing this just to release it as a full game and get some more hype around it at the time of that full release. And, you know, I think the numbers do support that a little bit. It did get a slight bump when it got to that full release, even if it really didn't last. But yeah, I mean, again, that's all just conspiracy theories at this point. Like, we have no idea if that's actually what the developers intended to do with this full release. Again, I mean, if anything, it seems like the full release was actually worse than the beta. So
yeah, so we will get to that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so to briefly recap what we had said in our original review of the early release of the game. So, positively speaking, the game had the basics down. The combat and movement were solid. The gameplay was generally fun, and the characters' movesets were all unique. They didn't seem like, like something, like copying something else. They all were appropriate for the themes and the characters. Like, say Bugs Bunny, all the things he does, that seemed appropriate. It wasn't just, like punch, kick.
And to its credit, it released, I think, 30 characters by, as of today, right?
I think, yeah, it's 30 total now.
That's probably the biggest strength the game had. It's like every one of these characters does feel unique. It clearly seems like they tried to pay their respects and tried to make each character worth including in the game, even if some were more questionable than others.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely, for me, probably the biggest strength of it and what set it apart from some other, generic copy and paste fighting games.
Yeah, also there was a ton of features in the menus, like in terms of how you could set the UI, because originally I think it has all of the damage points at the top of the screen. You could set it to the bottom of the screen, you could set it to be following the character, you could set the outlines to be whatever color you want, or for there to be no outlines. I think eventually that was a release feature that you could take the outlines away. So there was a lot of customization features. And now I heard that there was connection issues in the beta, but I think
I can absolutely verify that.
Oh, you can? Okay.
I 100% had issues with it, and it seemed to be more pronounced when I was not playing with you guys and I was just doing random matchups. But yeah, you'd have regular disconnects. You'd have matches that wouldn't even start before basically, you have the whole loading screen thing where you're on the stage and no one else appears. For me, it just gets stuck on the title card, and then...
well, that's been happening for me since...
That's been happening more, actually, in this version of the game since the beta, but I'm saying those problems were definitely prevalent at the start. Again, it's like you could write it off in the beta as just being, oh, it's not a complete game, oh, it's still in development, oh, they probably didn't anticipate this many players, yada, yada, yada. Can't make those excuses now, so... Yeah. Anyway, it's again, the issues that they should have fixed in the beta, they seem to go in the opposite direction with for the main release. I don't know, maybe that's us misremembering or reading into it more, but it's I don't know why we were trying to give this the benefit of the doubt at this point,
Oh no, it definitely got worse, which again we'll get to in a bit. And then the last positive was that the character inclusion possibilities were obviously the sky's the limit. Originally we thought, or at least I thought, that it was going to be Warner Brothers specific, which is fine because the amount of IP they own is insane. But the director of the game said that we could have any third-party character potentially. It's all dependent upon licensing deals and such. So go ahead.
I was going to say there were a couple, and I don't know if you wrote these out there, a couple leaks, proposed ideas that came from Disney, that came from, some of these other major studios, that if they had been included would have completely changed the landscape of the game. I heard Spider-Man at one point, which sounded just ridiculous.
Yeah, there's no way.
But anyway, it's apparently Disney might have been on board, but again, it's all hearsay. No one actually knows what's confirmed or denied at this point since it never happened. But yeah, anyway, you've got more positives and negatives here, so please.
Yeah, so as for negatives, when we went from the alpha to the beta, they put in this whole monetization scheme, which, when we talked about it initially, it seemed very aggressive, very kind of...
predatory?
Anti-casual, in a way.
Yeah.
See, to me, a microtransaction is something that's a few dollars. Maybe I'm splitting hairs here, but when you're paying $20 for one skin of a single character... in a game where the design of the characters is inherently kind of, very simplistic and undetailed, and, I'm going to look cockeyed at that. $20 for animated series Harley Quinn or Batman, where it essentially gives them less detail, or the same amount.
Right.
I don't know, man. And not only that, but they added, the grind for the characters. I think originally in the alpha, you spent gold to get characters. Oh, and it was the beta too, but it it was a lot less gold in the alpha, and then when the beta happened, obviously they wanted to put in the pain points to make you incentivized to get the premium currency, and I think it was, the equivalent of $10 per character to unlock them?
More or less. I mean, some of the characters they introduced weren't even part of like the Gleamium model. It would have been Battle Pass only, or you would have had to basically invest in fighter currency. So it's kind of hard to figure out what the exact real world translation would have been. But yeah, I'd say in that ballpark, if we're looking, if we're really splitting hairs, it's probably about $10 a character if you really wanted to skip the grind.
I think in the beta it was you either grind to get it was definitely gold. Fighter currency was on the release. That was a new thing. So gold was shared between using it to get characters and the perks for the characters, and then upgrading the perks for the characters, something which went away after the beta was over. So you had like one currency system split amongst all these things, so it took a while if you actually wanted to get all the characters. Like, I don't even know time-wise if it would have been possible to grind them all out in the, what was it, like a year the beta was around? Maybe you could have. But they did end up adding a few characters, so that would have padded out the amount of time you would have had to invest.
Yeah. So
the Battle Pass, mostly comprised of junk and filler, seemed like there's not a lot of value to it. And it seemed, at least to me, like it could have been like a $40 or $50 game where you get everything at the start, and then every time they add a new character, you either buy the character or maybe the character's free and just monetize the shit out of the costumes and all those other things.
So go for like the full Smash Ultimate model.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think maybe if they had thrown in some different game modes or built up the single player functions a little more, you could have justified paying for something like that. Honestly, I feel like they built it to be a free game, and always, that's obviously what they did. It's a free game where, you rely on microtransactions for the studio to make money. I think we all understand that, right? I don't know. It's like, it feels like a free game that just has some monetized elements thrown into it. So, if they wanted to be smart about it, I agree, like, build up that infrastructure a little more, make it a Smash-like thing. That model clearly has shown success in plenty of other platformers. So, look, it's all hearsay at this point, but it's like, that probably would have saved the game.
With it being free and being a fighting game, I think it's tough to strike a balance with charging money for fighters, because you want it to still feel competitive, but if a character comes out that's like busted on release, overpowered as shit, it's going to seem like it's an unfair advantage when you have something that releases that you have to buy, because then I'm not sure if this happened during the beta, but at least on the release version, new characters were either locked behind the Battle Pass for the first season that they were put in the game, or it would then be like, for the first 3 days, you can only get the character by buying them with the the premium currency, and then you would have to grind it out after that.
And that does sort of make sense as an incentive structure. You clearly did have people buying those characters at the offset. So, I mean, there are people who are susceptible to that, but, the price you're paying for that, or I guess technically if you have the Gleamium saved up, I don't know who's buying Gleamium in advance, but that might be the case where you have the extra gems lying around and you decide to spend it on a character you're really into. I don't know. I don't really get that mentality, but, clearly there is enough of an audience there that if they had gone about it the right way, it could work. I do think, the fact that it is a free game is probably what drew me to it. That's probably what drew a lot of the initial audience to it. If it was a $40 to $50 release that did go the Smash route, would it be any different from any generic fighter,
Well, there's a little game called Nickelodeon All-Stars Brawl, which is $50. And didn't do too well. From what I understand, the first one didn't. And then because the first one didn't generate much goodwill, the second one also didn't do well, even though when I read Steam reviews, people seem to say that like all the mechanics are solid and it's fun to play, but just no one bought it. No one's playing it online. I checked earlier, there was like 19 people concurrently on Steam.
Oh, Jesus.
It's a dead game.
God, and we look at MultiVersus as failure. Fuck. Okay.
Yeah. Somehow MultiVersus, with all the shit that's been going on, has a higher concurrent players even now.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think even at its lowest, it has higher than 19.
No, at its lowest, it's been like 600 to 700. I mean, concurrently on average, that's not nothing. I mean, I've been checking the charts the last week or so, just gearing up for this thing, and it's not been the worst it's been, but, that might just be people trying to hold a death grip onto the last few months of this thing. So anyway, you have the full timeline here.
Yeah.
I think it's important to read through this just to give the whole thing context, to understand why it...
And just to summarize...
Yeah, go ahead.
To cap off what we were saying. Overall, we had decent impressions of the beta. It was a game with, good bones. They just had to tweak the monetization, fix the bugs, have content come out more regularly, keep people's interest. But as you'll see, as we go through the full timeline of its rise and fall now, you'll see how things quickly took a downturn.
Much like the Roman Empire, which apparently most men think about more than once a day, you'll see its rise and fall.
Yes.
The MultiVersus saga continues next week. Right here on Utterly Nonsense.